Hello and welcome to Secrets of Organ Playing podcast. We are your hosts, Vidas
and
We've been mastering secrets of organ playing for more than 20 years and sharing them on this blog since 2011.
On this show, which we create from our home in Vilnius, Lithuania, we strive to help you grow in every area of organ playing, including practice, technique, repertoire, sight reading, hymn playing, improvisation, composition, music theory, harmony, and many others.
Our hope is to help you become a complete musician, or what we call as total organist, a program which we have created to help you reach your dreams faster than you would do on your own.
If you are new here, we invite you to subscribe to receive free updates of this blog at organduo.lt. By subscribing, you will also receive free video how to master any organ composition and 10-day organ playing mini course.
And now let's go to the podcast for today. Thank you so much, Paul, for joining in this conversation. I'm very delighted to be able to talk with you through the internet. I came into contact with your work a while ago, I would say some months ago, when I found out about your fabulous Toccata for Eric, right? And then
Okay.
you sent me some other pieces to listen to, and then I bought the entire Toccata, entire suite for Eric, which was very exciting suite for me, and I'm actually learning it, practicing right now. And just before we started, I practiced Prelude and the Fugue from this suite too. Thank you so much, Paul, and welcome to the show.
Thanks, Vidas. It's great to talk to you.
Excellent. So, we've been having wonderful many discussions about organ playing issues with organists, organ builders, musicologists, and composers from all over the world. And the first question that I like to ask people is, how did they first fell in love with the organ? Do you remember the story?
How did I start with the organ? Well, when I was a child, I really wanted to play piano. No one in the family played music, but for some reason I don't know why, I really wanted to play piano. So I asked my parents if I could do that. And this was when I was, I think, 8 or 9. And about the same time, my friend at school sang in the local choir in the church, and he asked me to come along. This was a boys' choir, sort of traditional English church boys' choir, and we sang, but we got paid pocket money to sing, especially if we sang for a wedding. And I think if you brought a new boy into the choir, you got a bonus payment. So that's why my friend asked me. So it was piano playing and singing in the choir. And then when my voice changed, I had a very encouraging choir called Johnny. He said, "Oh, you should try playing the organ." So that's how I got into it.
Do you remember the first instrument that you played, the first organ?
Yes, it was a small in quite a small church. It had an extension organ, so I think it only had about 4 sets of pipes. But when I played that for the first time, and when I was allowed to play a hymn in the church service, that seemed really quite exciting when I was young.
Mm-hmm. I see. And I know you live in the UK, right?
That's right.
Right. And it's interesting how did you came into composing for the organ? What was first, creating for the organ or playing the organ for you?
It was playing the organ.
Mm-hmm.
And I always liked composing as well, but when I started out, I didn't really write very much for organ, and I think it's because I was learning a lot of organ music. I'm talking about when I was at university and in my 20s. So I was playing a lot of music, and I like playing a lot of contemporary music as well, and all the old stuff and the Baroque music. But what I was composing was music for choir or music for theatre or music for children in schools. When I tried to write an organ piece when I was younger, it always came out sounding a bit too similar to the music I was learning. It was all a bit like Messiaen or a bit like Arvo Pärt, or I was finding it hard to sort of write something a bit different for organ. And it was only later, because I've always liked pop music, musical theatre, and other genres. So I suppose my way in a little bit later was to use some of those popular music styles in organ music. Not all the time. Sometimes it's quite classical, but that gave me a sort of a different approach, I think, rather than coming in from the end of the very long list of classical organist composers, if you see what I mean.
Yes. I notice in your style, sometimes you write those wonderful arias and intermezzos, right? Like in the suite, which remind people probably of more popular music, maybe theater music. Sometimes jazz music, right? Your chords are always so chromatic, and sometimes it's a blessing and a curse at the same time.
Yes, I think a lot of us organists quite like all that kind of thick jazzy harmony, but sometimes I'm deliberately writing in a sort of pastiche way. Other times I'm just trying to be inspired by a style, but to do something a little bit new with it.
So Paul, if you were to choose one piece, your pinnacle piece, what would that be? The piece that you are most proud of, for example, today? I know it's a difficult question.
Which is your favorite? Yes, that's quite hard to say, isn't it? The piece you've mentioned already, the Toccata, I think I'm fairly pleased with that, because in its structure, it's very clearly of the tradition of toccatas by Vierne and Vidas, and that style.
Yes.
But rhythmically, it's more syncopated, and it has that kind of almost. I mean, I can almost, if I had a rock band, if I was in a rock band, I would kind of arrange it for mass bass guitars and electric guitars and everything like that. I think it sort of has a bit of that style in it too. So I mean, that's maybe a nice example of something where I'm mixing the classical and pop styles. I have other pieces that are much more straightforwardly entertaining, and I have other pieces that are more experimental and more dissonant. So I don't have one style. I have many styles, or whatever I think will work best for the concert or for the performer or for the commissioning.
Maybe it's even better than having been limited to one style, right? Because sometimes a composer finds a unique sort of way of writing and sticks to it for a decade, let's say. And with you, for example, you are free to wander from one domain to another, from French domain, from French symphonic domain to the jazz, right? In the same cycle, and it's kind of for listeners, it's even more interesting, right? Because you can hear probably a lot of different varieties of different historical periods, and also historical ways of writing and stylistic modes and techniques, compositional techniques, right?
Yes, I hope so, and that's very kind of you to say it that way. We have a phrase in English, a jack of all trades and master of none. So if you wanted to be negative, you'd say, you know, a little bit good at lots of different things. But that's what I would want to listen to if I went to a concert as well. When I used to listen to a lot of music by Alfred Schnittke, and I used to love it, the way it was really dense and, you know, huge symphonic stuff. And then there'll just be a sort of little chart tune on a harpsichord at the end. And, you know, he would really, you know, instead of just mixing up notes and mixing up chords, he would also mix up styles as well.
Yeah, he would write collages like that, where he would insert musical ideas from other styles. A very, very clever idea, by the way, to refresh the style that you're currently writing in. Very like a musical surprise, right?
Yes, yeah.
Like a borrowing ideas from other sources. You know, they say if you borrow one from one source, you are a thief, right? But if you borrow from 100 sources, you are an artist.
I haven't heard that one. I like that.
It's about,
also, I think
it's about, Paul, about writers, basically, novelists who are influenced by many ideas, many different authors before them.
Yes, and I think it's also a tribute to where you're coming from. And, you know, I think very occasionally, very occasionally, someone in the arts, a writer or a composer or a sculptor, will have a really original idea. But I think most things are just new ways of doing old ideas. So I'm always get quite annoyed when concerts or composers are described as, you know, doing something revolutionary and new and never heard before, because actually it's always been heard before in a slightly different way. So I'd like to be very open about that and say, you know, I love music of the past, you know, 500 years ago or 5 minutes ago on the radio, and I just want to use that as much as any of the ideas I have.
Well, exactly. It's very difficult to be completely original these days, because most of the things that we can even imagine in music have been done before, and we only have to probably mix them up together in a new way to create something stylistically new thing. For example, Paul, in your suite for Eric, let's say you write the fourth movement called Tierce and Tire. So basically this is a French classical piece where the cornet stop basically sounds in the tenor age, right? And it reminds of the masses by De Grigny and Couperin, obviously. And the musical language is a little bit different, right? It's more chromatic chords, more juxtapositions of keys, seventh chords, ninth chords, augmented chords, things like that, chromatic chords, but with the French registration, French classical to be specific. And that's also original, you know. You mix two ideas, and the third idea is born that way.
Yeah, I think you're right. I don't think anything is completely original. And if I was listening to music, I would like to listen to something that was really good, not something that was really original. I mean, do you know what I mean?
Yes.
And a lot of great composers. I mean, Beethoven was, you know, has a very sort of, you know, he really refreshed the classical music style. But people like Bach, you know, was writing in a very old-fashioned style by the time of the 1740s, but he was just brilliant. Right. You know, so he wasn't writing the latest new original style. He was just doing really, really good music in the style that he knew.
Exactly, and he mixed other styles: Italian, French, Central German, and North German also, all together, and it became like a exemplary high Baroque style that we know today, right? sort of, and everybody now cites Bach as a Baroque genius and the pinnacle of Baroque era. But he was a sort of like a collector of many ideas of composers that came before him, right? So
Yeah.
we are all on the same journey. We are basically doing the same thing, but in different way, in at a different time of the history.
Yeah.
I always sometimes want to ponder what would Bach have composed if he had lived today, or 50 years ago, played those, for example, eclectic organs, symphonic organs with pistons, with many combinations. Most probably he would have created something differently, adapted to the environment, don't you think?
Yes, I think all good musicians will, use everything that's at their disposal. Yeah.
Maybe he would have used even multimedia, right? Maybe mixing several art forms, right? Who knows? Maybe he would have created even non-musical forms, something entirely different if he lived today, because a lot of art that is created today is purely visual, because we are very visual, at the very visual age of the history, I think.
Yeah. Who knows? Who knows?
Who knows? It's fun to speculate. So, Paul, what would you say to a struggling composer who is, looking at the blank page, or at the computer screen, opening Sibelius or Finale notations software, and doesn't know what to do next? He is stuck. There is this term, writer's block. So maybe composer's block is also a term. What would you suggest?
Yes, I know that feeling well, and actually the blank page is not very helpful, I find, because there are, the blank pages, there are so many options. There are a billion things you could do. So
Yes.
I always feel that I like to limit myself. Was it Stravinsky who said, the more you're limited, the more you're free? So there's a book, it's a French novel. The English title is A Void, where you avoid the letter E. So the whole novel is written without using the letter E, and that's obviously a huge challenge, really hard in English and French. I don't know how it is in other languages.
Yeah.
But quite often in my pieces, there is some thing that I've tried to do, and it could be I'm trying to follow a very strict structure, or it could be even something like I'm trying to write the piece you want. Don't use F sharp. You have to think very much more creatively about what you are using.
Yeah.
And also, most of what I write is choral, and I like classical discipline. If you write a 4-part piece, you should write it in 4 parts. You shouldn't just divide into a huge 16-part chord sect. Yes. Because you've run out of ideas to do within the 4 parts, or even a 3-piece. So it's that kind of discipline. Now, once you've written the piece, it may be that suddenly you do change it, but that's because you've made a very strong decision that is what the piece needs. You're not just using every possible thing. Like I say, there are a million things you could do. You've got all the instruments, you've got all the technology, you've got all sorts of ways of getting your music out there. Even if you're not in the olden days, you had to be a conductor and have your own orchestra or have your own publisher. But of course, now you can do it from your bedroom and do it all digitally, and then see if live musicians pick it up, and that's a whole new area as well. So I think limits are really good, because you then have to it makes you makes you make better decisions about the music you are writing.
Right.
If you know you can't do it, if you can't do anything, which is probably why I do a lot of pastiche styles, but also things using other melodies, because that is a sort of a limit, but a limit that actually releases new ideas that you wouldn't have had, well, I wouldn't have had, if someone had said to me, please write a piece of music and it can be anything, because then I had no ideas.
Exactly. So Paul, it's just like you wrote this suite for Eric in 2011. It's dedicated as a birthday gift to Mr. Eric Tyson, right? And you basically
That's right.
are writing based on the German letters on the theme of his first name and last name, right? It's a clever system that you came up with and are using throughout the entire cycle. I think you are basically limiting musical ideas to those letters like A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A, and then going back to A from letter I. Right, I, J, K, L, M, N, O, P, Q. With Q starts A again, right? And X is H, and Y, Z is A, B again. So basically, you're using German alphabet to create musical subjects out of letters, right? Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yes. So I think with that particular suite, I remember having the same issue of thinking, well, I could sort of write anything. I want to myself. So by using the letters of that name, so Eric Tyson, so there's a 4-note theme for Eric, and then a 5-note theme. So sometimes I use just one, other times I use both of them. So they're short melodic fragments, and then various approaches. I think you've mentioned there's a Prelude and a Fugue, there's a Toccata, so they follow sort of classical models. There's a Pièce en taille, which is a tribute to earlier music. The intermezzo is, as you say, in theatre organ style or cinema organ style. For Eric himself, like that style of music, and that was his, that's his sort of character. And then there's an aria and a duo as well. It was a lovely sort of occasion, because this was a birthday present, but it was a secret. Eric didn't know that it was being written, so he has many friends who are also organists, and we all learnt one movement of the suite, and then for his birthday we all turned up and we all played the music through, and that was a sort of birthday party organ recital.
And Paul, did you play the last section of the fugue at that occasion?
Yes, the fugue is very long, so we decided to divide up the work, and another organist played the first section, and then we sort of dovetailed, melded one player into another player, and I played the second section, which is quite hard. I find it very difficult.
Yes. Did you have to stop between two sections and switch places, or you seamlessly switched and continued playing?
Yeah, I think we tried to do it seamlessly. One person falling off the organ bench one way and the other person sliding on.
Great. Yeah, because the fugue has two subjects like the famous fugue by Durufle, Sur le nom de l'Ain, right?
Yeah, and that's really, is a definite model where you bring in your first fugue, and then a sort of second fugue starts, and then, as if by magic, at the end, you have both at once.
Yes. Very clever form that you're using for the prelude and the fugue. I think, yes, it reminds the master fugue and the prelude by Durufle, a very classical piece. And but for me, after practicing and hearing the toccata first, I had to switch gears a little bit and readjust my sort of expectations, what to expect from the Prelude and Fugue. I thought Prelude would be also very flashy, right? And the Fugue just like Toccata. But then after, I think, second run of my practice, or maybe even third one, it sank into my fingers a little bit better, into my mental memory also, and I started to like entire cycle just like Toccata, because every piece complements each other, and I think in a good way too.
Great. Well, that's I'm really pleased to hear that. It's really, really gratifying, because
now I think that Toccata is
a good idea. I don't know.
Yes, now I think like Toccata is like a dessert after a good meal, and you don't start with the dessert, right?
Yeah.
Yes. So yeah, the most exuberant music is postponed towards the end, and beginning is more conservative and less flashy, right?
Yeah, more rigorous, I suppose.
Yes, yes. Great. So, Paul, what are you working currently now? What are your creative projects now?
I always have lots of ideas bubbling away, but the pieces I'm writing right now, I'm doing some choral music. It's the run up to Christmas, so I always try to do some Christmas arrangements, usually quite easy things, because I do a lot of community choirs and choirs in the workplace, choirs in offices where people come and sing together. In terms for organ music, I've just written, well, I've just made some arrangements for a friend's wedding, and this is I was really pleased to be asked to do this, because it was for Kevin Bowyer, who I'm sure you know. He was my organ teacher when I was a teenager, and very inspirational, because he played all this really crazy contemporary music, and kind of showed that the organ can do anything. He plays all kinds of stuff, and I didn't know this, but he and his now his wife, they love Pet Shop Boys, which is a 1980s British band. And so they were, Kevin was married last week he was married. And I've arranged 4 Pet Shop Boys songs for choir and organ, where the organ is quite a classical toccata style, but the choir is singing the main songs. So that was a really nice thing to do. And I've also recently made an organ transcription of Led Zeppelin's "Stairway to Heaven," which I've been wanting to do for years. And you need a large instrument, because you can start off with the very quiet flutes and quintartons, and then you end up with everything going the blazes. In the place of the guitar solo, it's a solo trumpet solo, but up and down and clusters all over the keyboard. Mm-hmm. So that was a lot of fun to do. But for next year, organ pieces, I've got a lot of things I'd like to do, and sometimes they come out exactly as you plan. Sometimes they don't. Either they don't work, or you start one idea and it actually ends up being something else. So it's a bit hard to say exactly what might end up, but there are lots of things to do. And the more pop and rock music that I play, the more I feel the organ is just a brilliant instrument for it. And you're not usually just trying to replicate what's on the record. You're actually making something new that is specifically for a pipe organ. It will be different from a piano or a synthesizer or a orchestra version, using the strengths of the instrument, and usually audiences really like that, because again, they're hearing what the organ can do. The organ is the most versatile instrument, isn't it?
Yeah.
Historically and stylistically. That's why I like playing it, I suppose.
Yeah, these techniques of creating new arrangements of well-known pop music and rock music hits uh, can be very interesting for the audiences of organ music as well, and not only for rock music, right? And maybe, just maybe, some of them might get interested into classical organ repertoire after hearing such arrangement, don't you think?
Yes, because for a lot of people, you know, the general public, maybe in their mind, organ music is only for very slow hymns at a funeral, and you know, it can play very slow hymns at a funeral, and that's very moving. But that's sort of the only sound they have in their mind for what an organ is like. And I think I found this going to organ recitals as well. A lot of organ music that is played, and this is very my subjective personal opinion. There's a lot of organ music, particularly 19th century, early 20th century, that is played a lot, that isn't, to my mind, actually very good music. It's very noisy, and you know, it's a bit flashy, but I think the organ suffers from having quite a lot of bad music played on it in general. And I think the same thing about and what it can do is amazing. A lot of the time they're playing very simplistic arrangements that are a bit boring. But you know, that's maybe what we all think about the sound of a brass band. And the same with accordion, and the same with opera. You know, so for what we say, the man in the street, the woman in the street, say, what's opera like? And it's, you know, a very, very loud singer and a very loud orchestra. But actually opera is amazing if it's done really well from a composer's point of view and from a dramatic point of view.
Yes. There are various cliches that casual listener knows, right? Like Traviata, right, or Verdi's Rigoletto, or Aida, those famous arias and marshes and maybe even overtures, right? Everybody knows, or at least educated listeners. But there is so much more to it that are hidden.
Yeah, and it's, you know, perhaps simple ideas just are easier to remember. But you know, if you think of all the great, you know, grand operas, you know, and I'm not saying they're all, then they're not all bad, but you know, the tune everyone knows is bam bam da 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 dun 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 da 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 dun da 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 dun da dum. You know, that is not the best tune in the world. You know, it's a pity that things are known maybe for not the best example of their work.
Yeah. For some reason, Bach's Toccata in D minor and is the most popular organ piece, right? And it's clearly not the most well composed piece, right?
No, and it's, you know, it's probably not for organ, and it might not be Bach, but you know, it's dramatic.
Yes.
But because I can't remember. I know I've sent you a few of my pieces. I have rewritten the Bach Toccata in D minor into a new version. There was a competition a few years ago from the AGO in Seattle, called Bach to the Future, Back to the Future, Bach to the Future. So, you know, a new way of doing Bach. And I'm just taking the phone up to the piano, so I can say. And I was just playing around with ideas. Firstly, I was going to sort of make it even more theatrical and operatic and dramatic and lots of pauses and note clusters. But then when I started on the fugue, I realized you could just take out one note. So here's the fugue theme as it stands.
Yes.
So in a sequence of 8, if you play only 7 of them, this is what you get. I'll have to put this phone down, and I hope I remember how the 7 pattern goes.
Yes. Uh-huh.
So now we have a real
style.
Latin American, da, 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 you know, you can get your percussion going.
Yeah.
So actually the whole thing, it's sort of Bach notes, but there's only, so it's in the 7/8 time.
Yes, wonderful. Clever idea.
So I mean, now for me, that's actually how the music sounds, and it sounds very strange to me to listen to the normal version that is just in 4/4. It feels like, well, the rhythm has been lost.
I wonder if Bach could have composed something completely differently if he had the 7/8 meter back in the day, but he didn't, right?
Yes, yeah. But isn't it right that there were a few Baroque composers that did, maybe as a bit of a novelty, write pieces in 7 and 5 and things like that? I think there are a few examples.
Yeah.
I don't know enough. I can't quote them, but I'm sure I've sort of seen a mention of them around. But yeah, so Bach could do a much greater job of the 7/8 than I would. But all I can say is I really enjoyed doing that, and if the audiences also enjoy it, that's great. But if they don't enjoy it, that's okay. Doesn't matter. There are still 1,000 recordings of the original version and only 1 recording of my version. So it's still a minority approach.
Right. So, Paul, a while ago you mentioned this idea that, let's say, in olden days, people had to be basically conductors and have their own orchestras to perform their own music. Now, today it's different. You can basically spread your ideas from your bedroom, right? With the laptop, basically, and computer generated sounds. How do you find this spreading of idea of your pieces, of your music today? Is it challenging because if it's so easy today, everyone can do it, right? And there is so much more competition today because everyone is doing the same thing or a similar thing. How do you solve this competition dilemma of finding players for your music?
It's a dilemma, isn't it? And even in the course of a few decades, I've seen a real change. I'm 49, so when I started out nearly 30 years ago, and I'm thinking of just when I was trying to find my own music to play when I was 20. You'd have to go to the library if the library was open, and maybe they had the score. Maybe it was in a different library, so they could ask for it, and 4 weeks later, the score might arrive. It might not. It took a long time to find music and to listen out or to go to a concert because it was the only time that piece was going to be played. And of course, it's the opposite now. Everything is available at the touch of a button. So the problem now is how do you find what you need from the million choices? I mean, I think it's still better now for all of us because as composers and arrangers, I think the repertoire was more in control of a small number of publishers and publicists. So now it's a much more open field. You mentioned earlier we're living in a very visual age, and I agree. Sure. This is what I find a problem with slightly, because I'm not very visual at all, and you know, as a composer, all I want is for people to hear my music. And, you know, like I say, if they like it, that's great. If they don't like it, that's okay. But at least they've had a listen.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, I send my music round, I put it in for competitions, I try to let people know.
Mm-hmm.
The funny thing is, even on the web, enough fellow composers I've talked to have also found this. If you put a recording up on, you know, SoundCloud or something like that,
Yes.
maybe a few people will listen. But if you put a video on YouTube, lots and lots of people will listen.
Right.
But it's the same music. It's now a visual product.
Yeah.
So this is my dilemma. I mean, do I spend my time trying to write a new piece, or do I have to spend it all making videos
Mm-hmm.
of my old pieces, which is a different thing, isn't it? I'm not a videographer. I'm not really that's not really the way I think. But that's for me. That has what has brought the music to a wider public. I mean, I was lucky because Randy Mullin in the USA has got a YouTube channel, and he's recorded some of my pieces.
Yes.
And so lots and lots of people have seen those, and that has been really great sort of publicity for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that was just luck. If there were only sound recordings, I think, you know, just people wouldn't click on the link.
Exactly.
So
You know
this
what
is
I
saying,
think?
you know, it's just the way it goes.
Right, Paul, I think also similarly. And for example, I found your music, right? Or you found me, and I got interested into your music. So I think the key is networking, right? In a good way, not
Oh
spamming
yes,
people,
yeah.
but basically making relationship with your future performers and fans in a way that they would spread your music then for you, right? Look at us now. We're talking about your music, and technically, potentially thousands of people can listen to us in the future from, you know, 89 countries. We have listeners now. You know, and potentially they will come to your website and be interested in your other things that you create for vocal music and choral arrangements and other music that you do, right? Other projects. Maybe you haven't even started a new project, but you will start something else in the future, and they will come back to your website and then find out about that. So I think maybe other people can spread your music, but you just have to be findable for them, and
Yes,
develop relationships. Right.
yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, the music has to be easily accessible,
Yeah.
but also people need to know where to find it as well.
Yeah.
And the value of what we would call a third party recommendation is much better than a first. So if I say to someone, if I go to an orchestra and say, I've written a piece of music, they might think, yeah. But if another musician they respect says to the conductor, oh, you should listen to this piece I've just heard, that feels more valuable. It's a more sort of independent review.
Yes, absolutely. And in
I
some,
think it may I don't know whether it's, sorry. Is it the same for writers and authors? You know, if you write a novel in the old days, you know, you apply to every publisher. Now you can publish your own book on Amazon. You know, you can be a novelist,
yes,
which is fine, but you still sort of need a recommendation, or you need a reason for people to find you, because there are a million unpublished novels, and how do we know which ones are the good ones?
That's right. And that's where curators come in, right? People who have a good day and find new music for people. Sometimes I see organists, for example, they play, you know, hundreds of new pieces every year, and they are composers themselves, like Carson Kuhlman. I'm talking about, for example, from the United States, and he plays all kinds of music that you can submit to him. He would even sometimes record it, you know, and he is like a curator, right? He says, I like it, maybe some other people will like it too, and through his work, other people get recognized as well. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good, good. Thank you so much, Paul. I think we covered a lot of ground today. If you could go back in time when you first started playing and composing, right, in your early days, would you do something differently?
Oh, I don't know. That's hard, isn't it? Because you need to have unsuccessful experiences
Mm-hmm.
as well as successful ones. Otherwise, how do you learn what works and what doesn't work? You know, there are some specific things that I've done that actually turned out not to be very useful, and I probably spent too much time on them.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So maybe it would be refining it. But I think you have to try. You know, you have to try to write a piece or a style, and then realize that actually you're not going to be very successful like that. Or, you know, try a certain sorts of performances or concerts.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So it might be just a little bit of a clue of which directions might be more fruitful.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't think you should. I think if you were to take out all your negative experiences, you wouldn't actually have grow or develop.
And what would you say to people, organists, for example, who have an inkling to compose, but they are also hesitant because they say, oh, the world doesn't need another composer. There are hundreds of them and masters. I cannot do better than Bach, let's say, right? What would you say to a person like that?
Well, no, there's no need for any of us to write new things. I think it has to. I think if you want to, then you should. And I think for composers and any kind of writers, there has to be some sort of inner desire to write. So, you know, if you have that inner desire, don't deny it. Write a piece. If it doesn't work, don't worry. Put it away. Come back to it a year later, and then sometimes you can see more clearly. This was the good bit, and that bit wasn't quite so good.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
But also, you know, but on the other side, you know, don't feel that you have to compose. Some, you know, if you don't want to, there are lots of other creative things you can do. And you know, if composing is hard, try a transcription or try an arrangement, or maybe if you're an organist and you want to compose, maybe you should try writing a violin piece. You know, just something completely different, because then again you're sort of getting a new angle, a new way of thinking.
Yes, and writing for other instruments other than organs opens up new connections, right? Because new people will start to play your music.
Yes, yeah, and it's quite nice when we. I think, you know, I think my advice would also be for organists and for all musicians to, you know, listen to as wide variety of things as possible. Mm-hmm. Even if it's not really your style, it's still music, and there's still things you will get about communication and how to make a piece work. So even if you really love classical music and you would never listen to, I don't know, country and western, jazz, bluegrass crossover, if you listen to it, there might be something that kind of makes you think a little bit differently about your Handel interpretation.
Right. At least there is always the idea of rhythm. You can always borrow rhythms from other pieces, right, and create different melodies and harmonies. Right. So, Paul, it was a delightful conversation today. I'm so happy we met. Could you please direct our listeners to some place online where they could find you and your work online?
Yes, thank you. I will. The website is paulayres.co.uk, and the way you spell my name is PAULAYRES. So that's paulayres.co.uk. I've got a YouTube channel, and that's Paul Ayres 1970, Paul Ayres 1970. So that confirms to everyone how old I am. But also just a general web search should bring up some of my links and some other recordings that people have made. So if you'd like to take a look and a listen, I hope you'll enjoy it. If you don't enjoy it, thanks for taking the time to listen anyway. And thank you, Vidas, for this chat and for playing Suite for Eric.
Yes, thank you so much, Paul. I'll make sure to let you know how my practice goes, and if I'm successful, I might even record it.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Okay, have fun creating your next project.
Thanks very much. Goodbye.
This blog is supported by Total Organist, the most comprehensive organ training program online, where you will find courses for every area of organ playing, including technique, practice, sight reading, repertoire playing, hymn playing, improvisation, composition, music theory and harmony, with hundreds of scores and thousands of exercises. Here is what some of the students are saying.
Hugh writes, "The sight reading course has helped me tremendously. Thank you very much for your essays, courses and all your help."
Robert writes, "I found the fingerings, registration ideas and general comments to be excellent."
John writes, "I have found your download very helpful. It was really excellent. I have watched some of your teaching videos, and when I read your instructions, I tried to imagine you were teaching me. You may feel disappointed that I am 2-3 days behind, but I am a slow learner, and I have committed to taking the time to get it right, as you say. But the other night my wife commented that she had never heard me play such a detailed melody in the left hand so well. My left hand is generally poor."
Robert writes, "It has been a great pleasure in my life of having discovered your courses and material as well as the YouTube work of recordings. You have a calm and pleasant way of teaching."
Ron writes, "Hi Vidas and Osha, thank you guys. What a wonderful response to my email note to you. You've got me right, and I feel you understand my level of playing. Yes, at home, and lucky that I have an organ for that reason. I am paying attention to this, and I am going to try this haha no longer secret model. Yes, and I love Cesar Frank too. What is very nice about your blog podcast is that Osha and Vidas are like a Socratic dialogue, and by bouncing things off of each other, so much more information comes out and is expressed. Your comments contain a wealth of information and understanding. I really appreciate this. It is very inspiring and will keep us moving forward."
Would you like to receive the same or even better results that our students are getting? If so, join them at organduo.lt/total-organist. And of course, you will get the first month free too. You can cancel anytime.
Also, if you haven't yet subscribed to receive free updates of this blog, make sure you do that at organduo.lt. By subscribing, you will also receive free video, how to master any organ composition, and 10-day organ playing mini course.
This was Vidas.
And Osha from Secrets of Organ Playing.
And remember, when you practice,
miracles happen.